In about 2.5 years of challenge and speedrunning Payday as a franchise, we've only truly ever failed one attempt. The very first one: can you beat Payday 2 without firing a bullet? Admittedly, there's some semantics in this title, as theoretically we could have used launchers or projectile weapons as we did later in the completed Robin Hood run, but at its core, without firing a bullet was always a no-shooting run. So it only seemed right that one of my first Payday 3 goals is to try and right those wrongs and seek revenge for poor Yelwonkk, emulating a similar rule set within Payday 3's All Heist Challenge, which is growing by the month. As ever, here's a quick breakdown of the rules. Of course, we're going to be playing through all 8 launch heists as well as the 2 recently added legacy heists for full completion. This will be played solo with crew AI as they can't be turned off, and played in loud as the social stealth mechanics make it far too easy to just ghost your way through heists without shooting now. There is one instance where loud isn't an option, the new Turbid Station heist, where stealth will be allowed. The surprising twist here, after making an entire 40-minute video about how I wanted future challenges to be played on a lower difficulty, is that we will in fact be attempting this rule set on overkill, as I believe recent crew AI buffs might have just swung things far enough in solo players' favour to make it possible. Whilst I will still be playing on my main account, which is already at level 100, I will be heavily limited in what I can use on heists. Obviously, we're not allowed to shoot any bullets, that includes if a taser was the cause of any shots fired. As Payday 3 isn't full of wacky projectile weapons yet, the bullet rule will hold true, meaning no primary or secondary weapons will be allowed, but I can fire the 6-chamber Mark & Member overkill grenade launcher if I manage to call one in. Sentries will not be allowed as I'm saving them for a future challenge, and any of the unintended cheese strategies I showcased in Breaking Payday 3 will also not be fair game for this run. Anything else is completely fine though. So that leaves us with melee, which doesn't deal any damage in this game, takedowns, although stealth isn't an option, and throwables like frags and throwing knives. Not exactly a powerhouse of an arsenal. At least I have access to all tools, deployables, armor, and 21 skill points, as builds are going to be key in keeping Bootleg Dallas over here alive to avenge Yelwonkk's first and most brutal failure. I've set up 3 build archetypes for different heists in advance, but we'll touch on each one as we get to them. For now, starting off on No Rest for the Wicked, we're rocking a pure throwing knife build that's attempting to be as lethal as possible, even without shooting. This one was set up with most of the transporter skill tree, as it's impossible to ignore for solo players. Ammo skills like Scrounger to reset my knife supply, and of course Retriever to stop them from breaking. Gunslinger is just there as a source of edge to activate other skills within the build. Heading into SCB, I immediately got a spot of throwing practice in on some unsuspecting security before taking as many hostages as possible to really draw out negotiations. As the first responders started to arrive, it was immediately apparent how powerful body shields are for solo play, seeing as the AI can now fend for themselves. Running up to the rooftop to start adding fuel to the thermite barrel, you can see the problems start to emerge with me not being able to land a knife to save my life, resulting in a lot more armor damage than I can really afford to take when only running ammo bags. It's interesting, I actually find the slower, more clearly arcing trajectories of Payday 2's knives easier to aim. Maybe that's also because enemy hitboxes are less precise in Payday 2, but I'm clearly just used to leading my target, which isn't as necessary with these tiny daggers in the sequel. I also miss being able to land headshots with the knives, especially up against shields. Anyway, I had a mad panic on the way down the stairs, going through all 4 plates of armor I once had, and needing to actually use melee to stay afloat. When you're as limited as I am on this run, even things like pre-placed favors and melee's knockback capabilities become relevant. After stabilizing on the 2nd floor, I was finally getting the hang of landing my knives. In truth, they are pretty damn strong, one-shotting every enemy type in the game, barring dozers and shields. Also, with the ammo bags in this build, it's possible to start to duplicate those knives, creating a pretty much endless supply within this corridor. I was taken down for the first time on this run by a group of blue SWATs, but fortunately the assault ended at almost the exact same moment, meaning I was able to armor back up thanks to the much tankier AI who had yet to even go down on this difficulty. A far cry from the original run where they're carrying me instead of pulling me under like lead bricks. With their support, I was able to start the next assault at full health and armor, but completely out of healing resources from this point on. The value of tools really shines through when you don't have much else going for you though, as my infrasonic mines managed to save the fire alarm from being pulled at a crucial moment, before going on a brief knifing spree to protect the final seconds of the thermite's burrow into the vault. Solo, I managed to defuse 5 of the die packs and started making use of Transporter, another skill that released at just the right time to make this run a little less miserable, as solo players around the world are currently rejoicing the fact that they can finally carry 2 bags at once. I loaded up the entire crew and started slowly moving toward the rendezvous point, creating an impressive mess at the side exit of the bank as I headed outside and spread the assault wave across the map. With the bollards down and clear evidence that the escape would be coming in at the far end of the road, I dumped the bags and started flanking back around to the vault, losing Hoxton in the process, but gaining a Markham member in his place. With a few explosions and 4 more bags in hand, I was able to time the wave end perfectly, gathering beside the van right as Twitch pulled in, shuffling the loot inside 2 bags at a time, and escaping the heist right as dozers started to pull up on me, a special unit that I really don't have a plan for just yet. Just glancing at the results screen, every heist I complete should showcase 0% accuracy for both my rifle and pistol. Whilst this doesn't prove I didn't shoot my guns, it does prove that I dealt no damage with them, which is what's really crucial here. Up next, it's Road Rage, a heist I'm truly terrified of, so have pivoted with my build accordingly. This is the unbreakable body shield setup, and low-key, it's bloody monstrous. Whilst it still has access to throwing knives, it will instead be running armor deployables for increased survivability, as well as the key combo of solid sharpshooter or gunslinger and CQC specialist aced. You'll see why in the heist. After setting up on the bridge and grabbing a couple of hostages to go on a ride with the armored truck, I immediately set up the combo. This variant of the build is running sharpshooter, so I grab a hostage, proccing grit, ADS for 1.5 seconds, proccing edge, and with both active become completely immune to stagger thanks to solid. Effectively, this means my body shield can never be broken, so long as I keep activating these skills and avoid hazards like flashbangs and cloakers. It's easier when you can shoot, as you can keep activating combat reload to reset the grit and edge timers, but this version does the job well enough as I remain unbreakable all the way up to the bridge. From time to time I have to resuscitate my crew AI, but the combination of Medic Aced, Combat Medic and Code Blue is monstrously strong at turning your crewmates into undying zombies and granting you a little immunity to get back behind your human shield. This strategy was hugely successful in getting the van to the platform, at which point I retreated back to the north scaffolding, somehow got animation lock preventing me from firing when tased, and forced a SWAT to become my new bullet sponge. With that, I was easily able to survive the wave, heading back to the armoured vehicle just as an FBI van pulled up. For the second time, I was inexplicably spared from shooting when tased, and attempted to fill the antenna full of knives. Frustratingly though, they didn't seem to be making a dent in it, meaning I was forced to retreat once more, somehow full on sprinting through a third taser wire, as I just sort of grit my teeth and ran towards it. But even so, I was put down just seconds later, with Wolves still lacking the sense of urgency that might have actually saved the run. This FBI response was going to be a problem, as their arrival timing is seeded, so it's clear I'm going to have to push harder and faster on future attempts. Even so, the body shield strat had worked even better than I anticipated, with run 2 going much the same way early on. This time I attempted a more aggressive strategy, holding out at the van as I drilled inside instead of taking cover during the assault wave. I was, not for the first time, incredibly lucky with a taser's wire breaking over chains here, preventing me from firing and failing the run prematurely. But this was a lifeline I couldn't really take advantage of, as I found myself wandering into gas grenades to try and proc Combat Medic, which ended up being too much after running through all plates of armour I'd brought, eventually going down with my crewmates falling like dominoes shortly after. Run 3 was even more hectic with the revive chaining, as I lost my body shield early on and was quickly surrounded. I mistimed my revive immunity, overstepping by trying to light the flare to call in bile in a window I just didn't have, in the midst of a firefight too intense for the boys to survive. Attempt 4 was more of a struggle from the start, with my crew protesting the last couple of failures by lagging behind as much as possible to eat sniper lead and forcing me back to save them, slowing down the van escorting process. This resulted in a massive surge of spawns ahead of the van, forcing me backwards again to a down chains, going for an acrobatic jump and slide combo for the rescue, at which point I moved my mouse forward too quickly and unbelievably managed to bash it against my bootleg audio interface, causing an unfortunate discharge, forcing me to restart the heist immediately. By run 5 I'd perfected the civilian baiting strategy, completely dumbfounding the SWAT units encircling the van as my crew AI took care of all who got too close. Sticking to the far side of the vehicle, it was easy enough to remain out of the glint of sniper scopes and push forwards to the elevated platform. After almost stumbling on one, I discovered that crucially I could actually blow up zapper mines with throwing knives, which might be relevant foreshadowing for later in the video. Once I set up the drill, I defaulted back to taking cover by the north scaffolding, where the enemy AI wasn't bugged and snipers couldn't take pot shots at me, acting as a full-time revival support for all my damage-dealing crewmates, chaining almost instantaneous revives with code blue, making it almost look like Payday 2's Inspire had been added back to the game, before sprinting back to the armoured truck to finally gain access to the loot. By using my open deposit boxes asset on this run, I didn't have to spend the time lockpicking them to access the rare elements, bagging and calling in bile as soon as I had an opening to run to the flare with 5 seconds of invulnerability. Although this seemed to be an exposed location, I was able to slot myself between the portaloos and an open electrical box, hiding in the small nook their geometry offered, whilst the crew did the heavy lifting. I had one scare at the hands of a cloaker, but with a chain of revives I pulled the squad back together again, and as soon as the assault ended, moved to beat out the FBI van's arrival, moving 5 bags in one go effortlessly thanks to Transporter, securing all the loot I needed to flee the scene. Immediately I started sprinting over to the escape zone with a final flourish of throwing knife kills, completing the heist with a body count of only 20, but still an entire bag of armour in my back pocket. An unbreakable defence really can be the best form of offence in Payday 3. But we can't just sit on our hands and let Wolf, Chains and Hoxton do all the heavy lifting. I have a third bulletless build that could finally grant bootleg Dallas a spine, and I was itching to test it out on the toughest of arenas. This is my endless grenade build, which makes use of another skill combo. With Scrounger, Top Up, Frugal Thrower and plenty of ammo bags, we can bring an almost infinite number of frags on any heist. Coupled with Blast Shield and an easy grit activator like the Gunslinger Move and Cover combo, you can also make yourself immune to all explosive carnage you're about to produce, all without firing a single bullet. To be fair, Dirty Ice really isn't that tough in an arena as far as Payday 3's roster of heists go, but it is an ideal setting for massive multi-kills with this build. Spawning on the heist, I immediately masked up and ran inside to grab the manager and take some hostages. As always, I quickly hacked the manager's PC to find the correct keycode for the basement to gain access to the red keycard and disable the case lockdown, before using the manager's retina to gain access to the jewelry workshop, all before the assault had even commenced. As the cops started rolling in, I quickly realised the mistake I'd made by accidentally packing the standard lining, meaning I only had a single plate of armour to protect one of the craziest and most potentially self-destructive builds in the game. Not to worry though, with the protection Grit and Blast Shield offers, I was able to keep most of the responders at bay and save myself from my own constant chain of explosions. Hell, even when I failed to throw my frag grenade over a jewelry display, I took the hit like a champ. Sadly, the same couldn't be said for the manager. Just the first instance of collateral damage for this surprisingly sociopathic run. In any case, with throwable ammunition for days, I was comfortably able to keep spamming the key choke points with the SWATs having little recourse, easily holding down the VIP room for long enough for the assault to end and my crew AI to heal me up, before pushing back outside to power up the scanning machine once again. In this small window of opportunity, I headed outside to signal bile for the escape, before moving over to the main road to try and deal with the FBI van which had just shown up. Turns out, this thing is more resilient to explosions than I anticipated, eating up 9 rounds of direct impact piglet ammo before I gave up and decided just to play around it. It seems as though I'm stuck with FBI assaults whenever the Payday gods deem them necessary, but at least Dirty Ice is simple enough. Less than a minute into the assault, Bile arrived to open up an escape opportunity. After this, Cloaker produced an Olympic medal contending dive. I think the build really had proved its intangible merits, fleeing in that initial pickup before any more cops flanked their way around the geometry of the heist. A trip to Neon Cradle was next on the agenda, one of the easiest heists in the game to complete without firing a shot, but maybe not the case when stealth isn't an option. Nevertheless, I used the first minute of the heist to sprint directly through the employee areas, wandering straight up to the VIP room to save that minute of unnecessary drilling by brazenly nicking the blue keycard and opening up the padded door in front of the bouncers. With the police sirens blaring, I got to business with the objectives quickly, and in my haste chucked a knife into this poor civ's unmentionables. For a low violence, no shooting run, I haven't half already done some damage to the civilian population. Whilst I was back using the high volume throwing knife setup here, I was really overplaying early into this first run, taking far more damage than I could really afford to without any armour lying around on the heist. In the end, this over-aggression hardly mattered as, once again, driven by what I can only describe as muscle memory, I fired a Castigo shot when cornered and out of knives, that self-preservation instinct costing the run this time. Attempt 2 was much more successful though, as I avoided getting my armour supply annihilated at the start of the heist and was quickly set up to start moving bags of cash from the vault up through the elevator shaft. This build really can be quite satisfying once you start to get a handle on how quickly these knives actually fly, going all John Wick to clear a path up to the club floor and start moving the loot. Grabbing the loot cage parts back outside the building, the assault came to an end at the perfect moment for me to refuel, securing the piglet grenade launcher for a little extra firepower. Unfortunately, I'd failed to notice that Wolf was in quite a predicament, hanging perpetually from the zipline, defying gravity, but not bullets, meaning until he went into custody, he was essentially little more than a distraction for the gang. Not to worry though, I was able to secure 10 bags under the skylight and prepare for escape, except this wasn't as simple as I'd initially thought. This glass is actually immune to throwing knives, and firing a whole 6-shot special from the piglet was only enough to end a few more innocents as the frag started raining back down around me, detonating on the dance floor. This was a truly unexpected problem, and with heavy SWATs and dozers now spawning in, it was time to flee and leave Wolf, well, to the wolves. Regrouping at the vault, I decided to flank back around the heist once I'd baited most cops down to join me, unfortunately being blindsided by this dozer who didn't get the memo. On the plus side, at least the crew AI can actually put up a fight against bulldozers now, with Chains and Hawks not only managing the revive, but also creating the perfect distraction for me to turn this dozer into a pinsvin, probably my favourite Norwegian word, using an entire bag of throwing knives. That didn't solve the overarching problem though, with Bile arriving and the final charge commencing, with that pesky skylight still intact. My plan was to call in another overkill weapon by picking up a final few kills to go a second round with the roof, but unfortunately I had that door both figuratively and literally slammed into my face before I could even call in this run's potential saviour. This was enough evidence that I needed to change up my tactics, dropping Disengage and Transporter Ace in the build, and instead grabbing Demolitionist and Overcooked, meaning my Piglet's grenades should now explode on contact with the glass. Following the same strategy as before, I moved as much loot as possible during the first wave before heading to the surface to set up the cage. My mistake here was again being far too aggressive during the assault, eating 2 downs before getting even close to the escape. Just in time, the boys reinforced my armour, enabling me to call in the Mamba and demolish the skylight in a satisfying rain of glass shards. The damage was already done though, with only 1 plate of armour remaining as I waited out the chopper's arrival, flanking around the train and going down unceremoniously in almost the exact same location as last time. He might smile on the outside, but Bootleg Dallas is actually in tatters right now. The second attempt at this strategy was an impressively bad example of how not to play this sort of run, rushing out to revive Hoxton, knowing I'd be immortal if I just got him up, but failing to deal with the Zapper, who is also a lost condition after being thoroughly body blocked on the way out, ending up unloading 8 rounds outside of my control and forcing an early restart. Run 5 was a better and much more measured performance. Instead of trying to force the loot out and escape early, I took an extra assault wave to reset, hiding in the accounts office until the best part of the army was stuffed in the doorway, giving me the space to flank around and deal with the skylight again. Escape seemed all but guaranteed here, heading back down to the underground to bait the cops away from my secured loot, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory though, as I managed to eat a few shots from a dozer, leaving me at death's door just seconds away from a clean getaway. As Bile finally arrived, I seriously choked, down to my final life before jumping back up and reviving Hawks for mutual immunity, but not before a taser managed to force a bullet out of my revolver, meaning it didn't even matter that I was crumpled a few seconds later, as the run was already lost. Dropping Disengage might not have been my wisest ever choice, but we go again. Attempt 6 was the culmination of all that I'd learned playing this heist in the least efficient possible way. Grabbing the cage parts early during the first assault to get me closer to an overkill weapon before pushing back down to the usual holdout spot, admittedly changing my planned route after I noticed the tunnels were crawling with cops. Yet again, I perfectly threaded the needle to end another hostage, but you don't want to watch clean runs from me. Be honest, you're here for the carnage, which I was now offering plenty of after finally learning the art of the throwing knife. After a break in the assault, I started moving the final required bags of loot up the lift shaft, before being completely Benny Hilled on the zipline, where I was body blocked and nearly fell to my untimely death, not once, not twice, but on 3 separate panic-inducing occasions. Eventually forcing my way topside as the dozers started closing in and cloakers had started literally coming out of the walls. Also, this guy seemed to be holding his shotgun backwards. Good to see Payday 3 is keeping up that time-honored tradition of being a janky mess during challenge runs. It would have been a terrible loss otherwise. Once again, I was forced to do battle with a dozer in the kitchens, but as he seemed to only have eyes for my crew AI, I was able to turn him into a pincushion for a second time. This was basically enough to earn my heist completion, heading back to the underground to bait the final charge to commence down there, giving me just enough space to hold at the escape and clear the heist. Rock the Cradle was far from easy, but it did hit that challenge run sweet spot I personally love, where there's a puzzle or challenge that needs to be overcome, but never felt insurmountable. Under the surface is far less of a challenge though, and Transporter has hammered that home even further. By running the body shield build, I essentially wandered from circle to circle, everyone's favourite objective, with an indestructible riot shield, grabbing the first painting and immediately calling in bile. The upstairs hack was slightly more difficult until I successfully converted the SWAT into my new bullet sponge. Foisting a hostage in front of cops really does seem to cause some conflicts in their AI, as they get caught between wanting to melee you, flank you, and shoot at your crewmates, causing them to sort of hesitate between all three and end up being decimated by the buffed crew with ease. With the upstairs paintings now accessible, I started taking my favourite cop buddy on a tour of the upper floor, starting with Exhibit E4, where I just guessed on the authenticity of the Ledette painting, before trawling him around to E6, and finally E5, where I left my long-term heist companion to carry the final bag, face-tanking an entire assault wave and gas cloud to get the boys back on their feet, before flanking around the building one last time, heading up to the roof and escaping with all 4 necessary paintings. Another victory sponsored by Combat Medic, Solid, and Powerlifter. Now, Golden Shark is up next, but I don't want to jump the gun on this one. Payday 3 is different to Payday 2 and it enables you to take on the story in any order, so let's get back to it later in the video. Instead, I'm heading straight into 99 Boxes, one of the few heists that have already had their major cheese strategies massively nerfed. Knowing I was going to have to be out in the open for most of this one, I decided to stick to the body shield build, rushing in and grabbing a few hostages early on, before going loud prior to the PC hack. I was able to get that sorted and zipline over to the container yard before the first assault wave hit, which was a relief as it meant I could find one of the Witsier containers and trigger the thermite drop early. Corner camping with a sieve, I was able to bait most cops into the warehouse before hitting them with a surprise flank back around to the yard, starting the burning process on the container furthest to the east. After taking a police hostage early on, I realised that this main corridor was actually a major spawn point for the cops, meaning it was actually very tough getting my back to a wall. As a result, I'd gone through half my armour before the first wave was even through. Wave 2 was just as hectic, as I tried to complete the circle hacks mid-assault, only to be dissuaded by some scary-looking sniper lasers. Instead, I just stood in a small crevice on the upper layer of the containers and held my breath as the crew AI tanked their way through the entire wave, eating up a fair few sniper rounds of their own. This was enough for me to gain access to the first quantum computing substance, or whatever it's Kknowley meant to be, and rush back to the van before the wave got too heated. The war machine gave me the extra oomph to push back after it was buffed not to completely obliterate its actual user in the last patch. Unfortunately, the second container seemed even more exposed than the first, with another wave going by before I found a nice hiding spot within one of the other openable storage tankers. Once again, with my back up against the wall, the cops were completely flummoxed as to how to deal with me, and just sort of stood there defeated. The crew AI was still catching plenty of hands, but again I was able to juggle reviving them and brandishing the body shield to dissuade the cops from really going in on us. This was just about enough to start the second circle minigame, although at this stage I'd been worn down to the point of having no remaining armour, even from the crew's supply, being steadily chipped away at by the attrition-based gameplay. Even after it started to appear hopeless though, with a dozer on top of the gang, we were able to find a way to wriggle out of it. And I say we because this would absolutely not be possible without the crew AI. They are hard carrying on the damage front. After chaining about 12 revives together, they were finally able to take down the big guy's massive health pool without any damage assistance from me. Their success at this clutch moment was absolutely critical, as I finally bypassed the security system and grabbed the tech with no downs remaining. Escape would be all about skill, guile, and movement. So of course, after setting up the spike strip and sneaking around the warehouse, I was unceremoniously faulted by a shotgun heavy about 20 meters from victory, a crushing 30-minute defeat. I wasn't completely dismayed yet though, getting as close as I did without any RNG foresight wasn't bad at all. Now I could adapt, starting with the second container first this time, and securing its contents within 10 minutes. Setting up at the rear of the heist, everything seemed to be smooth sailing until a taser ambushed us over the back gate and stunned me into firing 4 bullets, just seconds before the end of the assault wave. Another tough loss to take, bearing in mind I still had 6 plates of armour in my back pocket and was absolutely on for a simple clear. Alas, this started a bit of a cascade of failure, as run 3 also went astray, although this time I'm not taking full responsibility. Here I was cursed by the crew AI phantom revive bug. I still don't know what causes it, but generally if a crewmate goes down and doesn't have a revive prompt over them, this will be fixed when the next member of the gang is downed. But if they all go down together in a short space of time, you can be left unable to get anyone up, which is essentially a death sentence for a pacifist-styled run like this one. Not to worry, the next attempt started briskly. This guy must have whiplash from being given about 3 orders in 1 second, but I was able to get a better setup on the heist before the first assault even started. This was a double-edged sword though, as being next to the container as spawns begin in Payday 3 actually results in a much more intense wave, causing my crew to get down more frequently, me to take more permanent damage than I'd like to early on, and despite Wolf's initial heroics, the entire gang hitting the floor permanently after around 7 minutes. Attempt 5 started very similarly, as I had the thermite set up before the wave began and was forced to fight off a fairly intense assault. Again, I was taking more damage than I could really afford to at this stage, reviving the crew, forcing me to drop my armor supply before I wanted to. With this in mind, I played with more aggression than usual, bypassing the security system around when the second wave got underway, enabling me to drag the pursuing cops around the heist, which I thought was a great idea until I noticed the cloaker having his way with my remaining armor plates. Not an ideal situation to be placed in, although I made sure to get my revenge. Even so, I was able to get the objectives moving during the assault simply by staying one step ahead of the swats on my tail. With Wave 3 starting before I was ready, I commenced proceedings by blowing my new convert into smithereens with the piglet, which cost me more than just a couple of armor plates securing a replacement. Whilst I was on the cusp of going down, at least I'd moved the objective along far quicker than expected, meaning I could just hide out in the Wixia vault and pray my crew AI would keep doing their thing. After yet another instance of self-sabotage as I throwing knifed my own hostage, I was just in time converting another one to keep the heist alive, with War performing an epic double save at a clutch moment just before the break in the assault. This was all the time I needed to heal up slightly, grab the loot and flee back to the warehouse as the final charge commenced. At the spike strip, Chains caught a sniper round in the spine at just the right moment to give me the perfect combat medic timing, meaning I rushed the escape zone with a final couple of seconds of immunity through my own piglet explosions, clearing what is, without any cheese strats, a truly difficult heist. That brings us on to Touch the Sky, the old finale for this series, before they added the legacy heist. I actually initially made my endless frag build for this heist specifically, so no way was I not bringing it along for this one. Heading in through the vent, I wanted to try and snaffle the QR code before going loud, as it makes life a whole lot easier, but I was quickly found out with no way to deal with guards silently, as it should be. This left me scrambling to get the master bedroom open quickly, at which point I just made a home for myself in everyone's favourite bathroom. This heist is exceptionally well designed for this build, as it's possible to lock down most spawn points with massive multi-kill explosions. This was all going according to plan until I inexplicably seemed to break my ability to actually gain grip by vaulting with edge. No idea how I did this, but it made things a little harder, requiring me to actually deal self-damage with my frags. Even so, this all sort of came out in the wash when inexplicably a single armor bag usage decided to refill my entire armor supply. I have genuinely no idea what caused this bug, but I'm not complaining. This is how blissful Payday 3 would be if Armor Up received a buff instead of a nerf. I made full use of those extra plates, whilst grit also seemed to fix itself in that heaven-sent moment, enabling me to get back to business with the explosions. With the red keycard in hand, I took control of Mason's office, dragging him over to the iris scanner instead of just cheesing the geometry with the microcam, allowing me to quickly input the right code and get my hands on the SSD. My way back to the office was a little fraught with danger, but nothing the piglet couldn't take care of, allowing me to set up in the panic room for the final hack. This was pure carnage, as a dozer found his way into the room, forcing me to again switch over to being the team doctor, whilst the crew did most of the heavy lifting. With Bile called in and the final charge on its way, all that was left for me was to mow down a few more heavy swats as they spawned with the member, creating space for an easy first-time escape. Legacy heist next, as from Update 2, we have 2 more Payday 2 classics to blitz our way through. At least I have some prior experience with these, as Turbid, once Murky Station, always used to be an easy no-shooting heist, but was forcing me to break that no-stealth rule as a stealth-only one. The build for Turbid was the most bog standard of stealth builds, as that's really all you need in this game. There are so many decent options for dealing with guards now that don't involve shooting, this was never going to be much of a challenge. I rolled solid RNG, avoiding the dreaded iris scan, which really can be tough on overkill, instead having to hack the employee's phone, which involved this sneaky bit of knife work as a distraction. Clearly all that throwing knife practice was paying off in dividends. With that, I was able to grab the first satellite prototype and secure it up by the escape van, heading back down to locate the keycard rack, which took an embarrassingly long time, as first I had to partake in light bondage out by the docks, before skewering this unlucky customer Dragonborn style with a knife to the knee. After taking up the high ground, I finally stumbled upon the objective, quickly scanning the key and stealing the second and final prototype. An easy first time clear, proving why this challenge would have been a joke if attempted without the loud stipulation. The second legacy heist was Cook-Off, which can be the toughest experience in the game if you're going for max loot, but can also be cut about as short as you want it to be. Once more, I went in loaded with an inventory full of potential explosions, blowing the cops away without a second thought. Hell, I forgot to even consider the pair of civs who met a fragmented end at my hand too. The grenade build is all about landing flashy multi-kills, bravely face-tanking damage, and sometimes just outright acting like a lunatic, following up going down for the first time by jumping off the side of the scaffolding to heroically administer a shot of adrenaline to Wolf. Despite taking a lot of damage, going down a second time shortly after, I never truly felt at risk, such was the destructive nature of my build if I decided to get serious. After splashing a definite 3-pointer on this sniper, my confidence was sky high again, turning the staircase into a work of modern art and cooking the final bag. With the assault still ramping up and 4 plates of armor protecting me, I chose to just make a mad dash for the escape, going straight out the window, sending this cloaker back to Payday the heist and holding out at the escape whilst I waited for the final bit of loot, with more grenades than I knew what to do with. Wow, what an explosive finale. Great to see the frag build doing so well, as it's the most compelling to watch from a viewer perspective. So yeah, you absolutely can beat Payday 3 without firing a bullet. Let me know... What do you mean I didn't beat Golden Shark? Of course. Who am I kidding? Let's have a look at how no shooting works on one of Payday 3's toughest heists that holds a much nastier twist than I was ever prepared for. Initially, I was determined that I could outdamage the cops on this heist, choosing to go for the throwing knife build as it contained the lowest number of necessary skills to make work, meaning I could pump more points into Transporter for the ludicrous amount of bag carrying this heist entails. After sending things loud, I rushed to grab the bank assistant, moonwalking him over to the iris scanner as it's marginally quicker than walking forward. This progressed us onto the dreaded circle hack, which is even more dragged out on Golden Shark with an additional override thrown into the mix. This all took so long I ended up eating far more damage than I initially planned for, just trying to push headlong through the objectives, going down for the first time early on, despite landing some pretty saucy cross-room pot shots for a second time shortly after. I survived the first assault wave by the skin of my teeth, but with Payday 3's attrition-focused design, I'd already made a fatal mistake in using up too many resources. The nail in the coffin came as the FBI van spawned in early into wave number 2. This timing was dreadful, but I was able to make it outside to take it on. Unfortunately, the real issue it presented only sunk in when I climbed on top of the van and threw over 40 throwing knives into the satellite. It simply wasn't breaking, either to my knives' damage or melee. This was a serious problem, as we already know that the Piglet seems to have a hard time with FBI vans too, so after crumpling once more, unable to even land a scratch on the radar dish, I decided to change things up in the build. First, I decided that the hostage control setup would be the best way to go on this one. Survivability was always going to outweigh damage on such a drawn-out heist. I also dropped menacing, as much as it pained me to do so, replacing it with overcooked to make sure the grenades were exploding right on target, as surely they were my only option against the FBI van without firing a bullet. Attempt 1 with this new strategy started off as a scouting run, as again I located the employee with second floor clearance and began the Wi-Fi hack. This time I made sure I had a hostage for when the going got rough around the pillars, using this employee and the solid combo to keep myself completely damage immune at least from the front. Adding Gunslinger instead of Sharpshooter made it even faster to reset the grit and edge stacks, making this much more sustainable, even if rapidly dropping and re-grabbing a body shield does get a little nauseating. After surviving one wave in the upstairs bathroom, I slowly flanked around the balcony to finish up the keypad hack, steadily pushing towards unlocking my overkill weapon. Back inside the safety of the bathroom, I picked up a few more knife takedowns to finally call the Mamba in, which coincided with disaster striking. Not for the first time, my crew was surrounded, worn down and left bleeding out in quick succession. To make matters worse, all three suffered from the dreaded Phantom Revive glitch, meaning not a single one could be picked up, to my complete dismay, with me following shortly after once I'd properly conveyed my frustration with the game. I wasn't quite ready to throw my dummy out of the pram just yet, but that loss wore my patient down more than most, prompting me to slightly loosen up my stealth rule as I had in the past. Theoretically, you don't really have to stealth Golden Shark's first few objectives the traditional way. All you need to do is procure a keycard and guess the keycode correctly, so after doing a little sleuthing on the second floor, I simply discovered the correct code, which will never change thanks to fixed RNG before restarting, which is admittedly a bit of an unintended workaround. The fact I was already trying to stretch my own rule set to its limits doesn't exactly bode well for future attempts, but getting immediate access to the vault room really reduces the pain of restarting this one. The genuine third run saw me camp out in the vault security room, maintaining a healthy supply of life body shields and constantly resuscitating the crew AI, as we all know they're allergic to cover. Again, I ran into issues with phantom revives, but this time I was at least in a reasonably defensible location, meaning only Hawks ended up in custody. This merry band of two was enough to hold out the initial assault, taking advantage of the lull in the action to head downstairs and grab some oxygen. As safe as this expedition appeared, it ended up being fatal, as on my way back I spotted the Zapper's mine, trying to defuse it with my usual knife strategy, but standing far too close in the process, electrocuting myself and firing 3 completely pointless shots in the sky. What a way to waste a promising run. Again, the angry juices were flowing, but I tried once more, setting up the thermal lance and controlling the vault room a little more actively this time. Being more aggressive in my positioning allowed me to keep slightly more heat off the crew, reducing their time on the floor, but still running into a scary phantom revive situation before Wolf's Down broke the curse and the power of combat medic did the rest. Those heroics were enough to make it to the end of the assault, a little worse for wear but at least not tased into an early reset. Assault 2 was all about earning enough overkill weapon progress to take down the FBI van, as an endless assault had already started as of the second wave. With my hostage in tow, I was actually able to push out through the main lobby, saved by the incompetence of the worst cloaker in the business, who was so disappointed by his first war kick, he decided to go back and try again, instead of just taking me down. This presented the opportunity for me to get outside and go to town on that pesky antenna. After 6 powerful explosions, no progress. 6 further direct hits, still nothing. Clearly, the FBI van was immune to every damage source this rule set allowed, and in running outside to test it, I'd lost the remaining plates of armor I had to a sniper. I did manage to regroup at the vault, licking my wounds, but was slowly coming to terms with the fact that an endless assault was probably unbreakable from here on out, and as my crew once again suffered from being unrevivable, which seems to be a far more common issue on Golden Shark than any other heist, I also wasn't long for this world, a crushing blow, not only for that attempt, but for my chances of completing Golden Shark without ever shooting at all. Still, we go again. Smash into the vault, set up in the security room, and hold out that initial wave, being as stingy as possible with my resources. With nothing to lose, I needed to achieve as much objective completion before the endless assault started as possible, suffering a few close calls retrieving the oxygen tank before wasting my first down. Fortunately, the end of the assault was well timed and I was able to heal up to full armor once more and put this soul out of his endless dancing misery on my way out to grab the piglet. I couldn't resist but try a final flurry on the FBI van which had just arrived. Sadly, the exact same result. Being completely honest with myself, this was the end of the road. As I aimed up with the Northwest rifle, which was just a HUD ornament for most of this run, I fired 12 shots full of regret. Admittedly, if I had a stronger weapon, I could have saved myself a few bullets of pain, but alas, it had to be done regardless. There was no way I could move more than 10 bags through an endless assault wave. Remember, the only reason I was able to move around at all was thanks to the unbreakable hostage I carried, and it wasn't possible to carry loot bags at the same time as holding onto a human. Reluctantly, I returned to the vault, heading inside to start up the looting process. Genuinely, it's impressive just how well a single hostage dissuades an entire army from shooting at a heister, as only a lone cloaker could break through my defences, and he was quickly put down by the crew. I survived the second extended wave within the vault, calling in bile and starting to move the loot, somehow dodging the sniper shots that could present a massive issue up on the roof. Not wanting to risk another wave in the open vault now I knew heavies and dozers were spawning in, I returned to a familiar setting. I couldn't use the slightly broken geometry of the branch manager's office, but I could always use the supply room next door, holding up in there whilst a dozer terrorised my crew. From 99 boxes we know that they can get the job done, eventually, so long as they're well supported, so whilst confusing the hell out of the enemy AI by brandishing this security in front of them, I managed to sustain the boys long enough to take him down. I'll be honest, this is a completely broken strategy. There's no way I should be able to get away with doing this on overkill, but somehow the riot shield build remains undefeated. After tying up my hostage again, who must be having the worst possible day at this point, I ran back to the vault for a penultimate clear out, before again returning to my safe space for another assault. Once more a dozer arrived immediately, but the cops remained flummoxed by my unassailable strategy. This time the gang worked together, taking down the Man Mountain in just over a minute, again surviving the wave with surprising ease whilst piling up the bodies and slamming my frame rate. I made a final dash to the vault, grabbing the last few bags, before this time setting up in the bathroom just for a change of scenery. As you might expect befitting the location, this wave was even messier, as chains flushed this fella's head directly into the plaster, and the dozer showdown was even laggier than the time before. At this stage, almost 30 minutes into the heist, there were more bullet holes in the scenery than there was wall remaining, and the green ammo boxes lining the floor were an insult to this run's premise. In a final unintended betrayal, I skewered my last remaining hostage as my knife's target fell in front of him. I'll forever be haunted by his disapproving expression, knowing he'd been sacrificed and I'd still had to fire a few bloody rounds. Regardless, I rushed to the rooftop. It was escape or fall at this point, but I made one critical error. Instead of heading up via a route my crew could follow, I took the zip line, leaving me on the roof alone, which gave the two snipers opposite all the time they needed to pick me apart, shot by shot. By the time I was joined by the squad, I'd lost all my armor to one bullet and used up my final down to another. It didn't look as if they'd be missing anytime soon, but in my panic as an impending wave was already on its way, I kept trying to brute force it, hoping that somehow the cover of the zipline itself would be enough to break line of sight. The old, if I can't see you, you can't see me fallacy. Alas, unsurprisingly, bootleg Dallas is still slightly wider than a metal pole, eating one final shot and hitting the ground for good this time. Maybe if I'd clung onto that down charge earlier into the run, I would have had just enough fuel to make it out alive. But at the end of the day, this heist was doomed from the start, and the challenge was failed long before that sniper round hit Dallas's love handles. So, for now, bearing in mind we don't yet have a fleshed out melee system, it isn't possible to beat Payday 3 without firing a bullet. For me, at least. You see, I believe that Golden Shark is theoretically possible without shooting, even if you can't destroy the FBI van. Because of how FBI van spawns function, they can actually spawn in as late as Assault Wave 4 on Overkill, meaning if you want to reset the RNG for long enough, it might be possible to complete this heist before that becomes a problem, although having to speed through the objectives sounds immensely high risk, and the whole seed resetting process is too time consuming for me to attempt again, bearing in mind I have another larger challenge run in the works for you already. Also, in a future update, seeing as I reported these FBI van damage inconsistencies to Starbreeze directly, I suspect they might be fixed, meaning this video will need an addendum, but for the time being, no, I couldn't beat Payday 3 without firing a bullet. But maybe you can, so I challenge everyone watching this to give at least Golden Shark a go on Overkill Loud with this rule set and see how far you get. Oh, and if you're wondering why I didn't run back the 12 bullet attempt after getting so close, knowing I could be struck by the Phantom Revive bug at any time, it just didn't seem all that appealing. Bearing in mind I knew the challenge was already failed, and I was just doing this to win back a little pride. Regardless, whilst I'm leaving this challenge behind for now without my pride and achievement intact, I did have a lot of fun with this run, and am already starting to enjoy Payday 3 challenge running more than I initially anticipated, which is a good sign. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to check out Apex Gaming PCs if you haven't already. There have been loads of seasonal discounts recently on my range, so they're definitely worth having a look at. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care. I'll see you all soon.